Start again. Volunteers in Hamilton have decided they are going to try to push ahead to create a bid for the Commonwealth Games, possibly now in 2026 rather than 2030, which will be the 100th anniversary of the Games here. Is this a good idea? Is Hamilton really wanting a Commonwealth Games? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. There's a chance that Hamilton will be putting in a bid to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games. The only bid in the world. It would be an unobstructed bid. If we bid, we get it. Steve Milton, you've been writing about this lately. Is this a good idea?
Hard to say at the moment, Scott, because we don't know how it'll shake down. It's hard to say even for that committee. That's why they're still just investigating and looking for the right plans to go. But I think it was important to get the framework out there. I think it was important not to, as long as it's not costing anybody any money right now, and they're not even involving any three levels of the government. That's the thing to remember. At this point in time, they're not asking for any input or even approval for any three levels of the government. They're going to need that soon, and it's only going to be agreement in principle, not any money. But they want to have a plan. They got to have some idea where things are going. So this is going to involve just not the Hamilton 100 committee, but moreover, and in a larger way, really, the Commonwealth Games Group of Canada, which has changed its name to Commonwealth Sports, and then the international group. And they're meeting in some form or another almost every day, some combination of those kinds of things. At the two prongs to this, one would be the reduction of the cost that would have to be to the city particularly, and two would be a way of changing income to the games locally. That second way, and this is the major thrust of this, is investigating private enterprise, private involvement. Now that comes with a cost too, because let's suppose that you had to build a little facility and the private did most of it. They're going to want to run that, aren't they? So those are always the kinds of things that you're going to trade off, but they've got to at least go down the road. This has a lot to do with afterwards. What does this thing look after the pandemic? What does it look like locally? There's going to be a sudden rebuilding process, some kind of things, as there was after wars, after depressions, after all of those kinds of things. There's going to be a heavy involvement. And it may not go, very little of that may go to Hamilton in the first place in the Southern Ontario corridor. When you look at the obvious thing of Toronto, because of the people and the money there. And secondly, and don't ever keep this one small, Waterloo, because it would be at the other end of that corridor and has the high tech in place already. So this is a way, I think, to at least investigate getting Hamilton onto that chart. Because every time you rebuild or you go through something terrible like pandemic, which we haven't gone through in our lifetime, but there's a certain, like a war, there's a certain percentage of a committee that's saying, what's this going to look like afterwards? Now, resources and human resources and money in those committees at this point in the disaster are very small, but they will grow over time.
Rick, is there a desire, do you believe, in the city of Hamilton beyond the committee for a Commonwealth Games?
I think if you're a sports fan, you want something because there is a certain legacy to any kind of games. You want to attend these events. You want to, show your civic pride. You want to, put Hamilton back on the map if it's faded for whatever reason. And sports brings people together. It's kind of funny to say that now because sports bringing people together is not something we want right at this moment. But in 2026, hopefully, we're in a position where we can, be back together again. I think financially or fiscally, we certainly have to press pause to say, are we doing the right thing? Are we building the right legacy projects? If it's a more regional games, as Steve is suggesting, and it's probably looking like that, that lessens the cost for the city of Hamilton. But yeah, there's going to be a huge boom to this post-pandemic life as we know it, because projects are going to be had, people are going to be wanting to go back to work, governments are going to be wanting people to go back to work. So I think there's going to be a lot of that thrust in construction type of jobs. And if you're building facilities, we need construction people. So yes, as a sports fan, as sports fans, we want it, but physically or fiscally, we have to be careful.
What do you think, Bubba? Is there a desire for this?
Well, I mean, again, we're all sports people here, so I don't want to be the Debbie Downer here, but it just, and again, remember, I don't live in Hamilton, so I may be speaking out of ignorance. I haven't spoken to anyone into the Hamilton 100 or the CSC, so this is purely opinion. But every time we bring up games coming to a city, I always think of a couple of things. money, legacy, world-class city. Is this necessary? My first wonder is, why did Adelaide pull out? Why are Australia not interested in having these games? Why is Hamilton, who are targeting for the 2030 games on that 100th centennial anniversary, which would make a lot of sense to me. I mean, you're looking at a historical sort of sense. But like, why are Hamilton the only ones? Or why are they so in a hurry to fast track Hamilton to 2026? There's a lot of expenses to these games. And again, I'm speaking as a sports person here. To me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
There is a budget right now. I think the original budget, Steve, was in the 1.4 billion, something like that. We know that there is never, ever, ever a games that comes in on budget. So let's automatically say $2 billion. Even if you can reduce your 1.4, they always come in at close to double, or
for the most part, yes.
So let's say 2 billion, just for the sake of discussion. Are you going to find $2 billion in government money in the wake of this? No. I really don't believe that. And are you going to find $2 billion of private sector money in the wake of this when most businesses have been hammered? And
well,
I would think if this was the Olympics, maybe. But for the Commonwealth Games, I don't see how the finances can possibly work for this.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And listen, this is I don't think there's a public appetite at all for this. I think there's a lot of complete disassociation among the public for this. For those people that aren't even angry about it, it's basically disinterest, if you want to know the truth. Now, there's a couple of points here that 26 is available, and Bubba's right. Why has nobody else want it? Well, because they don't really know. I mean, and there would have to be. I mean, this is a tough sell. I mean, it would be easier to sell, I think, Snowmobiles in the Cayman Islands than this one to the public. Given there's another bunch of factors here. There's capital fatigue. There's a whole question of LRT. There's still the feeling of what happened with the stadium here and how that split the city for so long. Now, I don't think anybody'd argue that stadium's been very, very helpful. Very helpful. Now, maybe we might wish it somewhere else, but it isn't. That was the situation that was presented. Well, we're presented with a situation here where 26 is what's available. I don't know. The problem that's going to be here is that by the time you have to make some kind of financial commitment, whether it's just general, and remember, these things can change. It's just principle. That's probably going to be early in 2021 for everybody to have done that. That's a very quick turnaround. Plus, you won't be able to make and find out some of the things that are going to be available for financing. In other words, like will some portion of, let's say, the 2030 games. Remember, the Commonwealth Games Federation is going to owe something to Hamilton here. So maybe some portion of the profit of the 2030 games, which you could argue won't exist if they don't have the games in 26. And remembering it's the 100th anniversary, and let's suppose it's somewhere in Australia or somewhere like that, then maybe some portion of that could come to Hamilton. There could be a change in the way in which sponsorships money is doled out, but that won't be determined in time before the decisions have to be made. This is a real tough thing. This is a very tough thing to do.
You mentioned LRT, you mentioned the stadium.
Yeah.
We know that in this city, love them or hate them, our council has a hard time pivoting quickly and making a decision fast on big projects. 2026, you can't finish it like in Delhi when they were still working on the projects as the athletes were showing up. You've got to be done, let's say 6 months even ahead of time. And that means you've got village to build, you've got other things to build, and that means you got to start backing it up. And then you have to get to a point where council or whomever else has signed off on this. I can't see our council and this city pivoting fast enough to be able to start the construction to make this happen. I don't even see it's feasible.
Well, and that's going to be what the private sector, when they're asked to look at this thing, what big parts of the private sector are going to say. Because if you want to get criticism of how this city does something, go to the private sector.
Sure.
Go to the private sector. They'll tell you that. So that's going to be, one of the big things. There's a lot of prongs to this thing. And I think that's just why they're investigating. And there are so many fronts, not only fronts, there are so many different ways that you're looking at, because length of time of the pandemic figures into this as well. Where are we sitting and for how long? And nobody knows. So you've got to have a whole bunch of different scenarios, but you got to land on one pretty soon, because they're going to need to know, at least in principle, by probably the 1st of June, because if you don't, the timeline backs up something
Rick,
crazy. This is a tough one.
Rick, you mentioned that as sports guys that we would love this. Every time I hear this thing discussed, though, I never hear it discussed as a sports event. I always hear it discussed as an infrastructure project. Do you think there are people out there who will buy tickets to go see Botswana versus Bermuda in badminton? I mean, I'm skeptical.
Well, I think there might be some. It's not going to be, sold out badminton championship games or whatever
How
the
big
case
is our
is.
Botswanan community in Hamilton?
It might be large. I don't know. But, there's another element to this in that if this is going to be more of a regional event, if we're pulling in cities like St. Catharines or Burlington or Steve mentioned Waterloo, is it going to, and there's going to be fewer sports and fewer athletes, is it going to cost $2 billion or $1.5 billion or whatever the case is? That infrastructure improvement is the legacy part of this. We're going to build a swimming pool in town, maybe a better baseball stadium, those types of facilities, but roads and infrastructure will probably be a part of that too. And you mentioned an athlete's village. I'm not sure we need one in town if we're not going to have all the sports in town. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, that's it. The athletes' village would be one of the first things to go, unless, because you've got Mohawk and you've got Mac, right? And they are in there in the backgrounds. And you're right about the pool. The pool situation, that's already sort of set on what they do there. They would have 2 large outdoor pools at Mac, but that wouldn't stay at Mac. That would be divided in half again. So now you'd have 4 portable pools you would take to other parts of the city. That one's pretty well determined that's how they would do that. But you're right about the infrastructure on that, Rick. The other part of it is maybe the money for any shortfall comes up on a post-recovery or post-pandemic housing plan, affordable housing plan, because that was the idea in the first place. It just maybe can't be as big. And that's where some private money will have to go into that, because it'll have to be mixed housing.
Maybe
As it was in Toronto for the Pan Am Games. And go to the east end of Toronto, just beside the Don River. If you want to see what the effect of something like the Pan Am Games did in housing, it's amazing.
Maybe we could just bill it. Looks like Bubba's got room to put an athlete or 2 in his place.
He looks like the NFL draft there.
That's right.
And I'm going to throw this at you guys. I mean, you talk about new infrastructure. Really, do we need a better baseball diamond in Hamilton? And who's going to use it? I mean, we know we have the Hamilton IBL team. I mean, are they really in the need for a 5,000 seat baseball stadium?
No.
I don't think there'll be baseball in these games.
No, they're saying they're going to now trim down a bunch of the games. Look, the problem with this to me overall is not the people who are behind this. Look, the Hamilton 100 committee people, they are good people. They are trying to do good things. They happen to be trying to do good things at probably the worst possible time in the last 80 years since the war, truthfully. And I can see no way that you can excite the people of Hamilton about the Commonwealth Games, first of all. And second, I don't see that you can get it built in time. And third, I don't see where the money comes from. Now, Bubba, I want to throw one other thing out to you, though. I had a city politician on my radio show this week, and I asked we were talking about the LRT. And I said, do you think the money is coming still to Hamilton with all the billions that the governments are throwing around now? And his answer, which kind of surprised me, was, well, what's another billion? Which, as in, the governments, they've already spent so much. So, 1 billion when you've already spent 100, who cares? That could, I suppose, still apply here, that you say, well, we're just going to keep throwing money at things until whatever. I don't know, until we don't have another billion.
At the end of the day, if the government keeps handing out money, who's going to pay for this? All 4 of us. So, I mean, at the end of the day, there has to be some type of responsibility here financially. And I just think, based on what's going on, not only in the world, but look at Hamilton Central, at what is trying to, we're trying to figure out if the Bulldogs need a new rink. You're looking at improvements of the downtown structure. There's buildings that need to be refurbished. I hate to, boy, I'm going to utilize someone that we're all have controversial thoughts in terms of Donald Trump about, making America great again. Well, make Hamilton great again in terms of focusing on taking care of the city. Do we need lavish games? Again, I say this as a fan of sports, a fan of athletes and their dedication and to winning and the pride that it brings. But this city right now is at a crossroads, in my opinion, from an outside looking in. I mean, it needs development. It needs a lot of things that are more important if you were to do a top 10 list than the Commonwealth Games, which I think we've already established that people, the public, whether it be in Hamilton or just outside of Hamilton, do they really have an appetite or care or even know what the Commonwealth Games are?
All right, two quick questions.
This is about exactly that, Bubba. If you look at the 2030 bid, it's reframing it. And the 2030 bid is all, besides the sports facilities, is all about the downtown.
Two quick questions as we wrap up then for everybody. Yes or no questions. We'll go around from Steve to Bubba to Rick. First of all, would Hamiltonians buy up tickets and let's say fill the Commonwealth Games to at least 70% capacity? Steve, yes or no? Or
Great,
would the
yes
area?
Or no? On tickets? No.
Bubba?
No.
Rick?
70% of all events? No.
Overall, would 70% of tickets be sold?
No.
Okay, second question. Would the city of Hamilton, which is in deep financial problem, do you believe the city of Hamilton would put $1 towards the Commonwealth Games, or would it be entirely required to be other levels of government and the private sector? Would the city put any money in, Steve, do you think?
Yes.
Bubba?
I'm gonna say no. I think this is purely on board in terms of public. Sorry to not to use one word.
Yeah, Rick?
Yeah, I think they do because of the infrastructure aspect to it. You don't get something unless you put something in.
Hey, folks, thanks for listening today. Great discussion. Right when we're done here, well, first of all, you can see our Twitter handles up in the corner, but also they'll pop up again. Give us some feedback. If you agree, if you disagree, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be back here on Home Games really soon. Thanks for watching.